The following program is for mature audiences only. Football talk shows, most of them sound like this. Blah, 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 blah. Not this one. That's because it features the former director of college scouting with the Chicago Bears. He worked on the staff that drafted, the likes of Devin Hester, Olin Kreutz, Lance Briggs. He's the man who takes shit from absolutely nobody. He's Greg Gabriel. Gabriel joins longtime Chicago sports reporter David Schuster. And this is, accordingly, Gabriel Schuster Talk Bears.
And welcome into the Gabriel Schuster podcast. I'm David Schuster, and he is Greg Gabriel. And you know what? That intro, Greg, it almost intimidates me because they make you sound like you're some kind of mythical giant or something.
What the hell do I know? I know shit. I mean, there's this old guy sitting here with a bum knee, trying to make a living, talk a little football. At least we had a win yesterday, so it's going to make the show a little easier. And unless you still want to be a cynic, but
Yeah, and of course you got your Forest Ranger hat on as well. So
I can take it off.
No, I like it. Keep it on. I like it a lot. All right, Greg, I'm going to be curious to hear all your thoughts on the Bears snapping their 6-game losing skid. They did beat the Houston Titans. We're recording this on Monday. The game was yesterday. The final score, 37-6, 400-plus yards of offense, 37 points. Weird. Allen Robinson going over the 1,000-yard mark for the second straight year. David Montgomery, 100-plus yards on the ground, 7 sacks by the defense. And Khalil Mack is back. He filled up the stat sheet. What are your overall thoughts?
I was pissed they didn't get 40. I was sitting there thinking, I want 40.
You greedy bastard.
That's right. I mean, what the hell? If you're going to break out of it strong. I wanted 40. And then they would have been the highest scoring team in the NFL yesterday. But, hey, it didn't happen. So,
well, they were pretty good, but we have to put things into perspective. Houston obviously came in shorthanded. They were without all their offensive weapons. Deshaun Watson is still a great quarterback, but listen, he was playing with the junior varsity offense yesterday. So you got to take that.
No, his receivers weren't there through no fault of his own. Hey, Will Fuller, that's all his fault why he wasn't there.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, he wanted to be on the juice. And, and his excuse was when it came, I was taking the substance and they said it was okay. That's what every single guy who gets busted for PED says.
Right.
So, I mean, that part obviously hurt Houston. But Houston's been playing pretty good football. They had basically the same team last week and the game was down in Houston, and they gave Indianapolis all they could handle. They came up here. I think the weather did affect them a little bit. Even though it was a nice day, it was still cold. And, I just think that team is seeing the end. I tell you what, the shots that they have on J.J. Watt on the sideline, just looking up in the air saying, when is this freaking thing going to be over?
Yeah. I don't think yesterday's game, not that Romeo Cornell really probably wants the head job anyway. I think he's set for life as an assistant or off into the sunset. But I don't think yesterday's game, if he did want the job full-time, did him any favors.
No, and did you see the one shot? Well, you were in the press box, right?
Right.
Did you go to the game? Okay.
Yeah.
There was one shot. You might not have seen it. Sometime in the fourth quarter, they had the camera of the Houston owner up in the box, and I assume that was his wife next to him. She was sound asleep. That told you exactly where that game was going.
Soldier Field usually has that effect on the hometown fans, but I guess yesterday it was on the visiting owner's wife.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the game because the game is obviously the story yesterday. Although, we're going to ultimately build up to, as this podcast goes on, the fact that the Bears, after losing 6 in a row, you think the season's over, and it probably still is, but they're still alive, Greg. They are. You
know what the key game is? They got to beat Minnesota next week.
Absolutely. It's an elimination game next Sunday.
Right. Winner's still in, losers out.
Absolutely.
And so it makes it a big game. The game's in Minnesota. Minnesota always stinks unless they play the Bears, and for some reason they play good against the Bears, at least the last few years. So.
All right, so we'll talk about that game in just a little bit here, but let's recap yesterday's game. Houston got the ball first. They did move the ball and down to midfield. They moved the field? Well, they moved the field too. Yeah. They moved the ball to midfield is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
And actually early on, Watson was, connecting with whoever was playing with him yesterday. But then it got to a third down.
Don't say that. I don't know if anybody was playing with him, but
his teammates, what I'm saying. Okay. It got to third down, and
come on, we got to have some fun, David.
Absolutely. Well, yesterday was fun, at least if you're, rooting for the Bears. They got to third down at midfield, and then I thought Pagano had made a good call. He blitzed on that third down play, and I can't remember if it was an incomplete pass. I guess it was an incomplete pass.
Yeah, incomplete pass.
And then the Bears got the ball back. And then even before you could say lickety-split, David Montgomery went 80 yards for a touchdown. We'll hear from Montgomery in just a second, but what did you see on that play, Greg?
I saw a hole so big that you and I would have got at least 20.
You with your bum leg.
That's right. I got one leg right now, and you're an old man like me, and neither one of us can run worth a shit. And that thing was so big, we might have gotten 20, maybe 25.
Okay.
Which is nice. I mean, because what have we said for weeks? Actually, the last 3 weeks, the running game has come on, been a lot stronger. You've been playing with pretty much the same offensive line 3 weeks in a row. So you got some continuity there, even though some of the guys are not, they're backup players in the National Football League, but they're playing better. They're playing hard. And that helps the running game. You're seeing what David Montgomery is as a running back. How about this? He needs to average 80 yards a game over the last 3 games to get 1,000. Who would have thought 5 games ago that he'd even have a dream of getting 1,000 yards in the season?
Well, he really should have had 200 yards yesterday, but that's a whole other story, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But, he was pretty much untouched on that one. I think he might have had a couple of fingers on him at the line of scrimmage, but once he got around...
he had a stiff arm down, maybe 8 yards downfield or something, but he had a huge hole. It was a good play call. It was a great way to start the game. Set the tone for the whole game.
Not really sure where their safety is. But anyway, let's hear from Montgomery. It was, I do believe, his longest play from scrimmage, and it's the first time the Bears have scored from their side of the field to score a touchdown. And I don't know, there was a number that was thrown out yesterday. It was a ridiculously long period of time, like 3 or 4 years. Anyway, let's hear from David Montgomery on his 80-yard touchdown run.
Really, they had nothing to do with me, to be honest with you. You probably could run through that hole and run to the 80-yard touchdown. So just being able to have that line move and push the way they did and create that amazing hole was crazy. So I just seen it and I hit it. And then I had a lot of help with Allen Robinson blocking on the outside, because if it hadn't been for him, I probably would have got caught.
I'm glad he mentioned Allen Robinson, because it wasn't only on that play, but Allen Robinson, actually, Greg, is an underrated blocker downfield. He does a good job.
Does a hell of a job. And in fact, as a whole, the wide receivers do a very good job blocking.
They do indeed. All right, let's talk about Montgomery, because he only had 11 carries. So, his other 10 carries went for 30-some-odd yards, not so great. And then, they asked him after the game, Matt Nagy, and then they asked him again this morning in his morning press conference, seriously, why doesn't this guy get more carries? And, he's partially correct when he said, hey, look, we scored 37 points. It really doesn't make a difference how we do it. But the point remains, if you have a big lead, why isn't your running back getting more carries? And he did fess up and finally say, you know what, I think he should be getting 15 going on 20 carries a game. And he keeps saying this after the fact. The bottom line is, during the game, they don't give him the carries.
No, but hey, in fairness, he did have another carry that he got about 14, 15, 16 yards on. It was called back because of a penalty. So that would have added to the to the total. And you got to give some credit to Cordell Patterson. He's actually played. I mean, we both been on his case most of the season as being a non-instinctive runner as a running back for the running back position. in the last 2 weeks, he's played good. In fact, he had a play yesterday down in the red zone where he cut back, which 3 weeks ago I would have told you he never could do that. And he only picked up 3 or 4 yards on the play, but the mere fact that he did it tells you that he's growing as a running back.
Well, he should, to be honest with you. He should be a lot, even better than what we've seen. Against Detroit, he was better. He was okay yesterday. He could still be a lot better than what he even showed yesterday.
He had 6 carries for 26 yards. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to complain about it. He's not getting a lot of touches. When you look at it as a whole, the offense, Mitch had 4 carries. The offense only had 23 total carries. That's not a lot. But, the Bears won the time of possession battle. They killed him on yardage. I mean, it was like well over 100 yards on total yards. And Mitch had his best game of the season. That's 2 games in a row. Throw out the play against Detroit where they got the ball knocked out of his hand. He's had 2 very good games.
Yeah, we're going to hear
his completion percentage has been very good. His accuracy's been very good. But I think a part of it is they're calling plays to his strength. They're doing a lot of rollouts. They're doing a lot of boots. They're not having him drop back, sit in the pocket, and read the field. He's playing more of a half-field game. It's more suited to his traits as a player, and he's coming up with bigger plays. That's why his statistics are a lot better.
By the way, Greg, I should remind all our listeners and viewers right now that you will answer any and all questions as we go on with this podcast, specifically at the end of the podcast. But did you say only good questions? Is that what you told us?
Well, they're all good questions, right?
Yeah, that's not what you said.
Oh, well.
I'm calling bullshit on you.
Okay. I'll go to confession, but at least my nose isn't going.
All right, Greg will answer your questions as we go on with the podcast. All right, the Bears have a quick 7-0 lead. First play from scrimmage. Obviously, that was an omen for what was going to happen the rest of the day. Then Houston gets the ball, and Duke Johnson fumbles quickly. Khalil Mack stripped them of the ball, recovered the fumble. Khalil Mack was all over the place yesterday. He had both of those. He had a sack. He had a sack in the end zone for a safety. He had a pass deflection. Khalil Mack was Khalil Mack yesterday. Did
you see the first play of the game? Defensive play of the game? He got the shit kicked out of him. He was lined up on the left side, outside of the tackle, and really like a wide 9 position. But they had a slot tight end. The slot tight end cracked back on him and knocked him actually towards the middle, probably a good 2 or 3 yards on his rear end. He never saw it coming. And he had to go out after that play, and then he came back in. But the reason I was watching him is I wanted to see, how they were going to block him. Teams go at him. They try to block him with more than one guy. And that was exactly the case. And he's been banged up, shoulder injuries, back injuries, whatever. And it's, people say, well, he's not making plays. Well, when he's got to take on half the other team, it's tough to make plays. The other people gotta make up for it and make the plays. Because if he's getting blocked by 2 or 3, there's got to be somebody free.
All right, we're going to hear from Danny Trevathan next year in just a couple of seconds, but you're 100% correct. Mack has been on the injury list with 4 different injuries so far this season, and he didn't practice until Friday of last week. I mean,
I don't think he practices until Friday all year.
That could be the case. That could be. And listen, you know what? If it worked yesterday, then you only got 3 more regular season games. You should continue with it. Anyway, here's Danny Trevathan talking about Khalil Mack, who filled up the stat sheet yesterday, and he says when Mack is doing what he does, that just opens it up for everybody.
I mean, that's what we have over there. We got playmakers. He's definitely one of the guys that's known to make plays, and he got back to himself. I told him he wore black forces today. He was out there, trying to wreak havoc. So it's good for him because a lot of us feed off of him. The whole defense, the whole team feed off of him when we make big plays, and that's what we expect him to do. And he had a big game, and he came out with the right mindset all week and executed his plays. A lot of guys stepped up. When they tried to double him, and we had a lot of sacks today. And that's what you want to see going out.
I couldn't hear a lot of that with his mask on, unfortunately.
I couldn't either, but suffice to say, the defense has taken a lot of heat the last few weeks, and they came back and played the game the way they're supposed to play the game, the way we expect them to play the game yesterday. 7 sacks, 2 or 3 caused turnovers, a bunch of tackles for loss. They played the run well, played the pass real well. Really, it was a strong showing. I just hope it continues for the last 3 games.
100%. All right, we'll hear from Roquan Smith upcoming here very shortly, but you couldn't be more right. After the last 2 games, and it was well documented, they were really piss poor, the defense. They were called out after the first of the 2 games against Green Bay by Matt Nagy. Then they laid another egg against Detroit. So they gave up 5 touchdowns in each of the 2 games for a total of 10. Anyway, let's hear from Roquan Smith right now. He was asked if giving up all those touchdowns and a lot of the criticism those last 2 weeks, if that motivated them for yesterday's game.
Definitely provide a lot of motivation, like the last 2 weeks prior to this week, about like not playing to our standards. So we all knew that deep down inside, and it was a reality check. We had to look ourselves in the mirror, and I felt like this week we came out and played to our standards, and we just have to continue that for the rest of the year.
You know, Roquan's got a nice hat, Greg, but it pales in comparison to yours.
He stole it from me, I thought, for a second there.
He should be in the Pro. Are they even going to have a Pro Bowl this year? If they do, he should be in it.
They're voting on it, but they're not playing it.
Okay, well, he better get all.
There's players that get bonuses based on getting voted into the Pro Bowl.
Right.
So they're going to have the voting.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to the game. The Bears get the ball back after after Duke Johnson fumbles away. It was a long drive that carried over from the end of the first quarter to the beginning of the second, and it culminated with Trubisky hitting Graham in the end zone. This is a really interesting play, Greg, and I want to ask you specifically about this play because the Bears had 4 wide receivers slanted off to the right, and they had Graham by himself. And obviously,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm
you knew it
right away. Right away, I knew they were going to the left side to Graham with the 4 to the right. To me, it was almost obvious. At least they do that a lot. They put the strength of the formation, and then you put Graham in a single up situation and let him win the jump ball.
Absolutely. And I guess obviously they know he's only going to be covered by one person, and he's got the height advantage over almost anybody in the secondary by a lot sometimes. And so that was a nice play on the Bears' part.
Yes. No, real good play. I'm going to say this, though, and I'm jumping ahead, but it's on my mind, so I'm going to say it. That was a very, very good throw by Trubisky because he put it right in the right place. But the throw by Mitch to A-Rob on the final touchdown, that might have been the best throw since he's been, it was maybe a 4-yard touchdown. That throw, you watch it. I think I watched it 5 times this morning. That might have been his best throw as a Bear.
Okay, and we'll talk about
that throw. I mean, A-Rob everybody was covered. That's why I kept watching. I wanted to see if there's anybody else. But everybody was covered tightly. 2 people on A-Rob. He had a window about 6 inches by 6 inches to put it, and he put it right in that spot.
Yeah, and Robinson, of course, had a great game all over the place and went over the 1,000-yard mark, as I said, for the 2nd straight year. And the question still remains: what are they going to do with him? Are they going to sign him or not? It's not like they can.
They can always franchise him.
Okay,
and the franchise tag isn't going to be really a whole lot more than what he's getting paid right now. He's getting paid $15 million.
Okay. All right. We'll see what happens. All right. The Bears are up 14-0. Houston gets the ball back. Actually, this is Houston's best and only really drive of the game. Watson hits Johnson over the middle for 49 yards. I don't know if that was a good play on Houston's part or if the Bears defense, for probably the only time all day, sort of slacked off a little bit.
Yeah, there was a letdown on that, but it was a good play on their part, on Houston's part. You got to give them credit.
Okay.
As Bill Parcells used to say, those guys are on scholarship too.
That's true. And Watson had a couple of runs in that drive, if I remember. And listen, he can beat you with both his arm and his legs also.
Yes, he can.
Like Trubisky. Watson eventually gets them into the end zone. He hits, I hope I pronounce this right, Kiki Kuti? Is that how you say it?
I don't know if I've ever got his name right going back to when he was coming out a couple of years ago. I thought when he was playing in college it was Cote, but I think you got it right.
Okay, it doesn't make a difference. 5-yard touchdown pass.
Coutee.
Yeah, cuts the lead in half, 14-7. But then the Bears just go on a rampage after that. After not doing much with the next drive, Houston has the ball deep in their own territory, and Watson goes back to try and pass from the end zone, and whatever pocket he had, it just totally collapsed, specifically because Khalil Mack made it collapse almost by himself. And then, he sacks Watson in the end zone and gets the 2 points for the safety.
Well, hey, there was 2 plays in a row he got sacked. The play before he got sacked the 4-yard line, the 3-yard line, and the next play he goes back and gets sacked right away in the end zone. So, I mean, that was the defense coming out and playing the way we expect them to play.
16-7 at that point. The Bears get 2 more drives before the first half is over. And by the way, the game was over at the end of the half. But Trubisky, his first touchdown, or his second of 3 touchdown passes. Darnell Mooney, a 12-yard touchdown pass, and then the one that you said a little bit earlier to Allen Robinson for 3 yards. 3 touchdown passes by Trubisky. 1 week after the Bears had 3 rushing touchdowns in the first half. So I guess, the offense has found a spark here the last couple of weeks.
Well, not only 3 touchdowns late in the half, that was a hell of a 2-minute drive, period.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, you got to give them credit. I mean, we've been criticizing for weeks. You got to give them credit when credit is deserved. That was a 2-minute drive done to perfection. The way I would have been happy with a field goal, and they got the 7.
Well, field goals, we'll talk about that in just a little bit also, because Cairo Santos is becoming absolutely automatic. We're going to hear from Trubisky next year. I'll give Aldo a little bit of a heads up. But like I said, the last couple of weeks, the offense has really opened up. 3 rushing touchdowns the first time in God knows how long, the week before against Detroit in the first half. 3 passing touchdowns by Trubisky in the first half yesterday. And by the way, at the half, I mean, he was almost perfect. 18 of 21 for 178 yards and the 3 touchdowns. Here's Trubisky. He was basically asked, what is the team's offensive identity at this point?
I think just a balanced football team. I think we just need to continue to run the ball well, and off that, just have a bunch of movements and nakeds, and just keep taking what the defense gives us. And you see the positive plays in first and second down. If you can just stay out of those 3rd and long situations, which we have, and we're just keep moving the ball downfield and keep our defense off the field, and let them do their thing. I think we're just starting to establish rhythm on offense. And then the defense doesn't necessarily know what's coming. They're running the pass, and we're able to avoid 3rd downs and just move the ball down the field and stay in rhythm. So it's an ongoing progress. We're still trying to establish that identity, but I think we're starting to find one. And just the way these guys are working in practice, I think it's a testament to just how we went out there today, and it's starting to come to life with the execution.
We're going to hear from Matt Nagy coming up in just a couple of seconds now also, Greg. But, a lot of people made a lot out of the fact that he's played well the last 2 weeks, specifically yesterday.
Against both weeks. I think you got to give him credit for last week, too. Yeah, there was one bad play. I don't know if that's all on him. Put it this way. The loss was not on Mitch Trubisky last week. The loss was on the defense.
It was on the defense.
Yeah. And
all right.
He played well. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say he has played well the last 2 weeks, but you got to put it into perspective against 2 lesser teams, 2 lesser defenses. They both are.
You only can play who you can play. And I had this conversation with Aldo before you came on. Here's what I think is going to happen. I may be totally wrong on this, but this is what I think is going to happen. And actually, Mike North and I were texting back and forth last night about this, but I think if Mitch plays good the rest of the year, he's going to get a 2-year extension, and he's going to be the quarterback next year. You heard it here first.
Okay, I'm going to be honest with you, because I did a poll of people in the press box yesterday. Not that we're, all knowing, of course, but you are absolutely in the minority in thinking that, because most people think that they're not going to give him the money and they're going to move on.
No, I don't think he's going to get big money. I think that you're going to basically get him at the price you want because of his inconsistency. I think that I'm guessing. I'm throwing a dart at the wall. I'm just telling you and I don't care what other people in the press box think. I'm using my experience on this one. Where are you going to go to get another quarterback?
Well, I don't know with it. I mean, that's
okay. Yeah, right. You just said, I don't know. You don't know. They know what they got here, and maybe the light's turning on. That's why I think 2-year extension. The last thing they want to see happen is him to turn out to be Ryan Tannehill and go somewhere else after 4 years or 5 years and turn into a player. I think he's limited in what he can do, and I'm not jumping on the bandwagon. In fact, when I was having this text conversation last night with Mike, I said, I'm not totally sold, but I really like what I've seen the last few weeks. If I continue to see that, that's what I think is going to happen. Now, if he goes down the tubes next week in Minnesota, I'm off of that thought completely. I'm just saying, and my caveat to the whole thought is that if this continues for the next 3 games, that's all we got in the season, unless they get lucky and end up in the playoffs, he's going to get a 2-year extension. He's not going to get a 5-year deal and get $100 million. I'm saying 2 years, and he's going to get marginal money.
All right. I'm going to ask you this because one of our viewers just put up on the screen or just texted or whatever in and said, okay, maybe a short-term deal, 2, 1 year, whatever. And by the way, Trubisky and his agent have to want to do this as well. He's got options. He can go somewhere else if he doesn't want to be here.
Right. But let's be realistic. His play has been up and down, correct? Yeah. Okay. So how good are his options? So are his options that he's going to get $15 million somewhere? That's not happening. So what's better for his career? Stay where he is and try to grow, or go somewhere new, have to start all over, even though I'm going to get more money. So I mean, there's going to be there's positives and negatives to both sides, and I guarantee you, I'm guessing, but
we're all guessing.
Yeah, but I that's just the way I think it's going to play out.
All right, something to consider here, because I think you would agree that they still should draft a quarterback.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I don't think it'll happen in the first round.
Okay, let's just say they draft a quarterback, whether in the first round or second or somewhere. I don't even know what their draft picks are at this point. They got them all. Okay, you got Foles, who's already under contract, correct?
Foles can get out of his contract after this year.
Okay, maybe he does. Maybe he sees the handwriting on the wall. If they sign Trubisky and draft a quarterback, he knows that playing time is going to be nil here.
But he's going to have to make that decision before the draft. He's going to have to make that decision during free agency, whether he wants to come back. He's got an out in the contract, so whether he wants to come back or terminate the deal that he has with the Bears. And the Bears can keep him at a relatively inexpensive price and have, in my opinion, a decent backup. You can win with that guy as a backup. You're not going to win every game, but a decent backup. But then Foles, he's saying to himself, okay, I'm relegated to being a backup. That's my career, end of the story. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions. But I do agree that they're going to draft a quarterback. I don't believe, we got months to talk about this, but I don't believe it'll be in the first round. And we'll talk about your boy from Florida a little later. But that's my stance right now, and I'll stick to it, at least for another couple of days.
Yeah, you'll stick to it until you see what happens in next week's game. And
That's right. That's right. I said I can come off of that thought real quick.
Okay.
I'm not pouring cement here.
Okay. All right. Let's hear from Matt Nagy, by the way, because Nagy was very complimentary both yesterday and then again today in terms of Mitch Trubisky. Anyway, here's Matt Nagy this morning. He was asked, is this now the real Mitch Trubisky?
When we made the move to Nick, again, at that point in time, it's really hard to accept for Mitchell, but I do believe that for a lot of different reasons, that's going to end up really helping him out in his career. And what it's done is it's enabled him to take a step back and see where we're at. And now these last 3 games, we're feeling an identity within this offense, and he's a big part of that. You know, he's able to, you see some of the stuff we're doing with the nakeds and the movements, and he's changing his arm angles. He's making good decisions where he's looking downfield, and if it's not there, he's getting the ball down to the backs and the tight ends, and they're making plays. It's hard to defend when you do that, when you get the run game going. We did early on, and then, you know, towards the end there, we when they knew we had to run the ball, that's where I thought they stopped us a couple times. But that's okay. Our guys are still working through that. But I've mentioned the identity part the last couple of weeks, and we feel that way, and the guys are playing with confidence. And I do believe it's real for Mitchell right now, and I like where he's at, and he's just kind of staying in his own lane, and he's just being a leader and making plays, and that's what's important.
All right, obviously a much bigger test upcoming Sunday, not only against a better team, better defense in Minnesota, but with a lot more on the line, obviously. So that'll be really an interesting test. I will give, the play calling yesterday. They had him roll out quite a few times yesterday. And listen, when Mitch Trubisky is at his best, it's basically when he rolls out and throws on the run. He's pretty damn good at doing that.
He is. I said it earlier in the show. They're playing to his strengths. Now, is it Bill Lazor that had to do that? On paper, it looks like it from the outside looking in, but obviously Matt Nagy has something to say about what the game plan is. He's not calling the plays, but he has a lot to say on how they perform or how they put together a game plan. So it's really a combination of two. It's a combination of all the offensive coaches, but they are playing to his strengths. It's the first time they've done it. They did a little the first year back in not Mitch's first year, but Nagy's first year back in 2018. Why they haven't done it is beyond me. I don't have an answer for it. And I can't answer for Matt without, he needs to sit here and tell us himself. But we're seeing it now. I want to see if it stays that way going forward. If it stalls, then yeah, it's time to move on. If it doesn't stall, like I said, he's going to get a 2-year extension.
All right. Well, time will tell. Obviously, that's always the answer to many questions. A lot of people are saying that the Bears made a mistake by yanking him in that Atlanta game, and then he unfortunately hurt him.
Well, that's what they do here in Chicago. They always it's after the fact. Oh yeah, they should have done this. They should have done that. I'll tell you one thing, and remember last week we're talking about it and kept saying, okay, that this game is the Mitchell Trubisky versus the Houston quarterback, show. Should have taken the other guy. Well, guess who won that one? Hands down, no questions asked, Mitch Trubisky. And I'm not saying Mitch is better at all, because he hasn't proven to be. But he was a competitor. That pissed him off, and he was a competitor, and he came out, and he played best game I've seen him play in years since he's been here.
Actually, I thought
he had a bad throw yesterday. Tell you that.
I was going to say, I think his best game was against his best game was against Tampa a couple of years ago, but that's because Tampa had no secondary whatsoever. Okay. Whatever.
But he's easily the best game this year. And I thought last week was his best game this year. So it's 2 weeks. He's really compounded it. He's done it 2 weeks in a row where he's shown improvement and played better than the week before. The offense has moved the ball. The offense has put points on the board. I'll go back to what I said. Not his fault they lost last week.
All right. Greg Andreas just threw a question up on to you, Greg. And basically he's asking, where do you think Ryan Pace ranks among general managers as far as drafting and bringing in talent? Where would you put him?
I mean, it's been average. He's had some hits. He's had some misses. And there's not a general manager in the league that doesn't have hits and misses, but you want the hits to be a lot more than the misses. Right now, he's very average, and he's got to improve. And we can just look at the signing of Quinn. All of us, me, you, people around the league thought the signing of Quinn was going to be a great move. So far, it's been he makes some plays against the run. He gets some pressure every once in a while. What's he got? 1 sack, 2 sacks on the year. It's a guy that should have 8 or 9 sacks every year.
Yeah. Well, he did in the past. All right. Before we get to the rest of the NFL and a little bit of college also, we prefaced last week by saying that we're going to talk a little bit about quarterbacks, and who knows? They could draft the first round, second round, third round. They will draft a quarterback. And so I took a look at the quote unquote rankings of the quarterbacks, and this is pretty much a collective list here by a lot of the so-called experts. Trevor Lawrence is on top of the list. Justin Fields from Ohio State is second. I don't know too much about Zach Wilson from BYU, but he's basically listed third among the quarterbacks that are going to be available. Then Trey Lance from North Dakota State, who only played the one game this season.
Yeah, I can't jump on board on that one, only because he's only played one game this year. He plays at the FCS level. If he would have had 10 games this year, would be a different story, because you'd have a basis of comparison of last year going to this year, but you don't have that. You're going to see him at the Senior Bowl, but again, coming off of couple of weeks of practice and then one game all year, and he wasn't good in that game. You can't say he jumped out there against FCS level competition. He was very average. He threw just over 50% completion.
Is there going to be a Senior Bowl for him to showcase himself?
As of right now, there is, but who knows?
All right. Well, that'll be a big opportunity for him.
There's not going to be an East-West game. Excuse me. And I don't know about the other All-Star games, but as of right now, there will be a Senior Bowl. Okay.
All right. So Trey Lance is supposedly number 4 on the list. Then Kyle Trask. And I told you to do some homework. The kid from Florida. He's a big dude. He's 6'5", 240 pounds. I watched a little bit of the Florida LSU game, and I have to preface by saying they were playing in some weird conditions. It was really foggy. So there were a lot of drop passes because the wide receivers were losing it in the lights and the fog. But he had a couple of interceptions in the first half. Then he threw 3 touchdown passes. And then he sort of faltered again at the end of the game. And by the way, there was a kid on Florida's defense who probably is the dumbest penalty I might have ever seen. They stopped LSU on a 4th down play, and then he gets an unsportsmanlike penalty for picking up one of the opposing player's shoes and throwing it down the field. So LSU stayed alive, and they kick a 59-yard field goal or whatever it was to basically win the game. But what are your thoughts on Kyle Trask now that I've given you your homework assignment?
I think he's an average quarterback. I'm not saying he's not going to go high, because there's a lot of guys that go high that aren't worth a damn. But watching him, first of all, when you see how big he is, you think this guy's going to have a cannon arm, and he's got a very average arm. Ball kind of floats, doesn't always throw a tight spiral. Yes, he's accurate, but in watching that offense, now, you said he threw 2 interceptions in the game against LSU on Saturday night. Go back to the Georgia game. On paper, he only had 1 interception. He had 2 dropped that were right in the breadbasket of Georgia defenders. He should have had 3. He's lucky he didn't have 3. So that would have been 5 in 2 games in the SEC. What I don't like is, again, not that arm strength is that important, but the ball kind of floats, which I don't like. Accuracy is good, and his touch is good, but he plays in a half-field offense. Now, what's Mitch do best? He plays best in a half-field offense, but you don't see him reading the whole field. And a lot of times he's going to number 1 only. Sometimes he'll get to number 2, but number 2 is always on the same side of the field. You don't see him, looking to the right and then come back to the left. And that's what I keep looking for when I'm watching college quarterbacks. So, yeah, the guy's a good quarterback. I don't see a first-round quarterback. Could be a second-round quarterback. Without making a school call and finding out about the intangibles, how he learns, how his teammates react to him, what kind of leadership value does he have. Unless you know that, it's hard to say. I'm just looking, basically at 4 tapes that I watched the end of last week and through Saturday, and I wasn't all that impressed.
Well, his numbers are really good for what little
numbers are great. There's no question.
Yeah, and it's in the best conference in college football, of course, the SEC. His height and his weight are, I don't know, for the most part, their advantage is 6'5", 240. Right. He sort of reminds me of Tim Tebow size-wise. I'm no expert on this, obviously. What was was Tebow had a soft arm also?
No, Tebow had a rocket arm to fix it, and they never could. When Tebow threw the ball, he wouldn't start up here and just throw. This guy's got a pretty tight delivery. I got no problem with that. But Tebow would drop the ball way down by his knees and bring it up and around like this. You knew where the ball was going before he got to here, let alone coming out of his hand. And that killed him once he got to the National Football League. Coaches tried to break it, but when he got back in the game, he always reverted back to that real long delivery.
All right. Well, for what little it's worth, Trask has got one more opportunity to not only help his team, Florida, win the Southeast Conference title game, and they're going against Alabama, obviously, on Saturday. But he's also got one last chance beyond any postseason stuff to impress the scouts against, obviously, a really good football team in Alabama.
Probably the best defense in the country, a pro-style defense. We'll all be watching that game to see what he does. I just, I don't want to kill the guy, but looking at the numbers and looking at his size, saying, okay, this guy's going to be, I'm excited. And then I watch him, and he throws the ball like he's a 5'11", 190-pounder. So that's why, I came off him. I'm not saying he's not going to play in the league. I just wasn't that impressed.
Fair enough. I gave you your homework assignment, and you get an A+ for that, Greg.
Well, that's better than any homework assignment I ever got in school. I was a terrible, terrible student.
Yeah, I wasn't very good either, to be honest with you. All right. Anyway,
I had ADD before they invented it. They didn't invent it until I had kids, and then my daughter had ADD, and she goes, "Thanks."
Getting back to yesterday's game, I didn't really talk about the second half because there really was no reason. I mean, the Bears were up 30-7, and they scored 2 field goals in the second half, both by obviously Santos. And Greg, he's made 18 in a row. I mean, I
know he's Mr. Automatic.
Is this guy going to be all pro?
He's got a chance. I tell you what, though, he's in the NFC, and there's another guy in the NFC that's pretty damn good. Some guy used to kick here.
Oh, yeah.
Robbie Gould.
Yeah. I'm forever going to be a Robbie Gould fan. Speaking of kickers, what's the kid's name up in Minnesota? Bailey? Is that his name?
Well, he's not having a good year. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets cut before Sunday.
You know what? I'm betting he does. I mean, it's sort of tough to bring in a kicker with 3 games remaining, but listen, that's what a GM's job is to do. He missed 3 field goals and an extra point yesterday, and that was critical in that game. Let's see, that would be 10 points. Still would have won the game, 10 more points because they lost.
Yeah, but it changes the whole complexion of the game and how you play it.
Of course it does. So, yeah, I mean, that could be advantage Bears come Sunday. All right, let's go around the NFL yesterday, Greg. Green Bay wins over Detroit 31-24. Aaron Rodgers continues to march on, 3 touchdowns, 10-3, and I do believe they're currently the number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yes. No, they are right now, and they're playing good. Got to give Detroit some credit. Detroit, gave them a battle. Mm-hmm. They didn't put up the white flag right away. And they even, they scored near the end of the game. They got a field goal. They still needed a touchdown. Tried the onside kick at home. I don't know if you saw it. They almost pulled up. They almost pulled it off.
He was out of bounds though.
Yeah, no question. That's why I said almost pulled it off.
Yeah, he was. It's going to be really interesting, Greg, because, the Bears' 3 remaining games, they're at Minnesota, they're at Jacksonville. I don't care what happens against Minnesota. Jacksonville's just an atrocious football team. And we'll talk about them in just a second also.
I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to see the field against the Bears in that last game.
Well, he might if
they need it for home field. If they already have home field, I don't think he plays.
Well, it's more than just home field. It's the number 1 seed.
Well, that's the home field advantage. That's what I mean when I say home field. If they got the home field wrapped up, I don't think you'll see Aaron Rodgers play in that last game.
All right, well, that'll be interesting. Listen, you still could win our bets, by the way. You could.
Of course I could.
Yeah, but hopefully you won't. No offense. All right, so Green Bay wins. Tampa Bay beats Minnesota yesterday, 26-14. We talked about Dan Bailey. He missed 4 field goals. Tom Brady's up, down, up, down. I guess he was okay.
Tampa is not a good football team. I keep saying it. They're going to be out the first week in the playoffs unless they're playing somebody from the NFC East.
Could be Tampa Bay and the Bears if the Bears get into the postseason.
I'll take the Bears.
The game would probably be in Tampa, so I'm not so sure about that. But whatever, we're way, way, way ahead of ourselves. All right, Tennessee, talk about a Jekyll and Hyde team. They destroyed, and everybody should, Jacksonville, 31-10. I think you would agree Derrick Henry right now is the best running back in football.
Right, and he's got a great offensive line, and that helps. But you're right. I mean, Derrick Henry does a great job. Tough guy. When he gets going, he's just tough to bring down. Too big, too strong, too powerful. 215
yards in yesterday's game. Kansas City had a big lead. Then I don't know if they coasted or whatever, but they held off Miami 33-27. Kansas City now, and I've always said that they're the best team in football, but they are now the number one seed after Pittsburgh has stubbed its toe the last 2 weeks.
Right now, I think the best three teams in the AFC are Kansas City, Buffalo, and Pittsburgh in that order. And Buffalo stunk on a Monday night game earlier in the year against Kansas City. I have a feeling that's going to be those two teams again in the AFC Championship for the Super Bowl. Buffalo's a good football team, and they people question them because they hadn't had the so-called signature win. Well, they beat Pittsburgh pretty good last night. So now that we're done with that game, we can skip that one.
All right, well, but we got to talk about Buffalo's uniforms. You like them.
No, I said I didn't like the red ones.
Oh,
I said I said I started going to games 1960, the first year. I like the blue and white. I can't get into that all red.
Yeah, I didn't like them either. But I know what you said. You liked the Bears uniforms yesterday.
Yes, I did. I love the helmets. And I got like I don't know. I haven't looked lately, but I think like 190 likes on that tweet. I should send that to George and say, George. Or maybe Tony Medlin.
I don't
tell T-Med. T-Med, we got a strong vote here to change helmets.
Tony knows where all the bodies are buried up in Hallis.
Hey, the T-Med is the absolute best.
You know what? Actually, their uniforms yesterday, when I first saw them come on the field yesterday, I go, what, the Cincinnati Bengals are showing up? That's what it reminded me of.
No, they've worn those jerseys once before. I think it was last year. The jerseys, I don't dislike them. I like the pants with no striping on it, but I just really like the helmet. Now, if it had the Michigan thing in the front, which it didn't, then I wouldn't have liked it because I'm not a Michigan fan. But just the three stripes like that, I thought it was really cool.
All right, one last thought on Buffalo. They're going to win the East unless they really stub their toe, and I don't think they will. And they're going to win the East. Like I said, do you remember the last time they won the East?
Yeah, I was a young guy. I had hair.
1995.
I know.
5 years ago.
I know the Giants. That was the last year they went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row. That was the last year of that 4-year run to the Super Bowl.
All right, let me ask you this, Greg. Have you ever bet on a football game ever?
Before I got in the league, yeah. But the parlay thing. But once I got in the league, I stopped because you get fired for that.
Yeah, of course. I didn't mean to insinuate that, but I
haven't bet since 1981.
Okay, and I'm not a betting person, but if I was, I would have put the mortgage on yesterday's Seattle game against the Jets.
Oh.
They were laying 15.5 points. Now, that's pretty scary giving away that many points. But Seattle coming off a stinker and the Jets being a stinker, period. And sure enough, they won by 37. Russell Wilson with 4 touchdown passes. Seattle wins 40-3. I finally figured out why Adam Gase is still the coach there. He's there as an insurance policy
you've been calling for him to get fired since game 1, probably since before game 1. But
he should.
I was watching a Jets writer on Twitter this morning. He had a thing about how many plays, because there's the big thing last week about the blitz that cost them the game, and they said how the guy, Frank Bush, who was the interim defensive coordinator, he only called like 5 or 6 blitzes as compared to Greg Williams, who blitzes all the time. Played a very conservative defense yesterday. Really didn't matter. The Jets stink.
Yeah, like I said, I think Adam Gase is still the coach there because he's the insurance policy that they go 0-16 and they get that number 1 draft pick. I can't see any other reason why he's still there.
The NFL should probably do what the NBA and the NHL do and have a lottery. And that would end that bullshit real quick.
You're right. You're right. A few other games to talk about. A lot of them. There were a lot of meaningless games. I mean, Dallas beating Cincinnati, meaningless. Denver over Carolina,
How
meaningless.
about this? Going back to Dallas, somebody said, well, they got flexed out of a Sunday night game coming up because they're so bad. And Jerry Jones saying, the Cowboys are always the preeminent team on TV. In the big draw. He's out of his freaking mind.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. Philadelphia beats New Orleans 24-21. That helped the Packers, obviously. Jalen Hurts. I didn't watch that game.
I didn't either, but it surprised the hell out of me.
Yeah, he had 106 yards running, and he totaled 246 yards overall. So, I mean, credit to the kid. I don't even know where he came from.
Oklahoma.
Okay.
And he was actually at Alabama before that, and then when Tua came on, he left Alabama, transferred as a senior transfer to Oklahoma, played at Oklahoma last year.
All right. Well, obviously he must have been a touted high school quarterback because, Oklahoma and Alabama are, two of the top programs in the country. Washington, our good buddy Ron Rivera, he's now leading that division.
I'll tell you, did you happen to see his locker room speech after the game?
I didn't see it after yesterday's game. I saw it after the previous game. Well, I'm sure he was,
Well, it was Ron Rivera being Ron Rivera, and Ron like I do, and it actually reminded me of when he first came here as the offensive coordinator, and he didn't like the way the defense was playing in practice down at Bermuda, and he kind of ripped into him. Now, he didn't rip into the Washington team. I almost said Redskins. Washington team yesterday, but he did say, you're in first place because you deserve to be in first place. And he goes, now act like it.
Yeah, as well they should.
Yeah.
They've won 4 in a row. They came off the deck. They were 2-7. Now they're 6-7. I don't know what their last 3 games are. I hope they're divisional games so they can really earn it. But
I was looking, I don't remember, but it's not a cakewalk for them. The Giants could still get there. Philadelphia, I think, is, they've only won 3 games. They're out of it. Dallas is out of it. So it's really going to get down to the Giants and Washington. And right now, Washington is just playing too good. I think they're going to end up, in fact, they might even end up as an 8-8 team, which would, at least you feel a little bit better about them being in the playoffs.
Yeah, good for them. One other game of note, Arizona beat the Giants yesterday, 26-7. That's why Washington is now leading the East. And Arizona, at the moment, Greg, they are the number 7 and last team in the playoffs. So it's going to come down to Arizona, the Bears, and Minnesota. And, I don't have all the other team schedules in front of me, but I think of the 3 teams that we just mentioned, I think the Bears have the easiest of the 3 schedules, but they have to beat Minnesota on Sunday.
Yeah, that's the key. If they don't beat Minnesota on Sunday, they're done. And Aldo and I can talk about it later in the week when we do the preview. We can, look at what the Bears' upcoming 3 games are, who Arizona's got to play, and who Minnesota has to play, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it is you and Aldo later in the week. I have something else I have to deal with later this week. So I will be out of the picture later in the week. So you can have some fun without me, Greg.
Oh. Nah.
Good impression of being a SEAL. And I don't mean a Navy SEAL either. One last thing I want to ask you about, and obviously this is near and dear to you. Lovie Smith got replaced, or he got fired. There's no other way of putting it. He got fired by Illinois after another losing season, 17-39 in his 5 years at Illinois. It just didn't work. He's 62, Greg. He's made a ton of money.
16 years as a head coach, and I think he's got a year left on his contract at Illinois. So he's going to get paid 1 more year.
Yep.
I would be surprised if he goes back to work. When you get 16 years as a head coach, you've made a lot of freaking money.
A lot.
So who knows? But I think Lovie will go off into the sunset. How about this, though? Illinois, how the Big Ten next week is, 5's playing 5, 4's playing 4, etc. he wanted to coach that game. They wouldn't let him.
Oh, you know that he wanted to coach that game?
Oh, I know it for a fact.
Interesting.
He was told at about 8:30 yesterday morning that, that he was done. And he was disappointed he didn't get an opportunity. He won't have an opportunity to coach next week in that game.
All right, help me out. I know you've done this for years and years on the pro level, so you might not know the inner trappings of collegiate, but why do they terminate him yesterday as opposed to waiting after that last game? What's the difference?
You know what? I don't have an answer, and here's why. Signing day is Wednesday.
Okay.
So 2 days from now. There's going to be kids who have committed to Illinois, and one of the reasons they committed to Illinois is because they wanted to play for Lovie.
Right.
And so they're going to not sign with Illinois, maybe not sign anywhere, and then sign in February when the old traditional day was. But they just screwed their own recruiting class because of that. Now, one of the names that's being prominently mentioned for that job is Lance Leipold, who is the University of Buffalo coach.
Yeah, I saw that.
And he's got them in the MAC championship game. They're only averaging like 52 points a game. And they could have scored 70 on against Akron on Saturday afternoon, and they played backups the whole second half. But Lance, won like 6 or 7 Division III titles at Wisconsin Whitewater, and then he went to Buffalo, and he took over really a poor program, got them to prominence. Now, I don't know if he's got any interest in going to Illinois, but I'm going to say this, and people around here are not going to like what I'm saying. Illinois is not a good job in football. I think it's the hardest place in the Big Ten to recruit, except for maybe West Lafayette and Purdue. When you compare that, and Lovie, I thought when Lovie took that job down there, he'd have a strong shot at getting the top kids in Illinois. He didn't have a chance. Those kids still went to Iowa, still went to Wisconsin, Notre Dame, Northwestern. It's a hard place to recruit, and I don't care who's coaching there. It's still going to be that way.
Well, whoever's going to be the next head coach is going to have their work cut out for them, and it's going to be uphill to say the least, because already some of the kids who did commit to Illinois before signing have already said they're certainly going to, if not just totally decommit, they're going to certainly consider it over the next few days. So that does not bode well for that program.
No, it doesn't. And like I said, I think it's an uphill battle for anybody who has that job. Like I said, people get pissed off at me. I don't really care, but I think it's the worst program, the worst football program. Other sports might be a different story, but for football, it's the worst place in the Big Ten right now.
How do you like Jim Harbaugh getting $8 million a year for what he's doing there?
He got an extension for $8 million?
No, I think that's what he's currently.
That's what it get. Yeah. Well, from what I understand, because there was talk at the end of last week that they're going to wait until the end of the season. Well, I don't think Michigan's going to play. They backed out of the Ohio State game, last week, and they didn't have anywhere near the COVID problem, but a bunch of other schools had. There's a lot of people believe that come next week, he isn't going to be the coach at Michigan. We'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Okay. All right. As Aldo has just put up on the screen, it's time now for questions from the audience. So, Aldo, if you throw the questions up on the screen, and here we go. This is from Dented Fender.
What do I think of Alex Bars? I think Alex Bars has got a chance to be a decent player, but I'm not totally sold. I think he's got to get stronger. I've watched, I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I watched him throughout his career. His junior year at Notre Dame, he really struggled. He was on the ground a lot. And at that point, you knew we needed to get stronger. Did get stronger going into his senior year, played well the first part of his senior year, then he tore his ACL. Bear signed him anyway. His line coach at Notre Dame was Harry Heastan, and Harry came here to be the line coach. So Harry knew him and signed him. Had Mustafa also. And he's an athletic kid. He can play tackle or guard. He's played some center earlier. And because of that, I think the worst case scenario for Alex Bars is that he's a backup with a lot of versatility, and you need that. but I'm not sold that he's exactly what you want as a starter.
All right, we appreciate that question from Dented Fender. You think that's on his driver's license? You think that's his real name?
I don't think so.
It'd be great if he was an insurance adjuster. Hi, I'm Dented Fender.
Okay, I see the next one. Would Greg consider a trade for Carson Wentz?
Yeah, what's going on?
Philadelphia would be, they've been in cap hell before. They can't afford to trade Carson Wentz. He just signed an extension a year ago. I think the cap hit for trading him would be like $50 million.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what happened to him. I mean, unfortunately, he had his injury, and he's never been good ever since then. Time will tell.
They in fairness, they did get in the playoffs, I think, last year. But you're right. Since that injury tore his ACL, he hasn't been as good. They say he's got a confidence problem now. I'm not in Philly. I can't give you all the answers. I just don't think, it's easy to say, he lost his job and now the rookie's playing, but you got to look at the monetary part. And the monetary part would totally kill unless the contract got restructured. You can't trade him. They can't afford to trade him.
Greg, that actually conjures up a question. I mean, Wentz obviously went to a small school. Joe Flacco went to a small school. Where'd he go, to Delaware or something like that?
Delaware, yeah.
Okay. Now, they both had initial success in the league, okay? But then they sort of tailed off. Can you
Flacco was at a big school before he went. He only went to he was only at Delaware 1 year. And I went and scouted Flacco and then went to one of his – the biggest question on Flacco was not talent. Actually, two questions on Flacco. One was his ability to make plays with his feet. He looked like a statue at Delaware. He still looks like a statue in the NFL. He's not a very mobile guy. But the other one was leadership. And the thing that we saw at Delaware was that even though he was making plays, he'd come off the field, he'd go sit by himself. And he wasn't around his teammates, and he wasn't trying to fire up his teammates. And where he's learned to become a better leader since he's been in the NFL, I still think as compared to other top quarterbacks, he's average.
All right, fair enough. Do we have any other questions? We do. Here's Dented Fender again. Why do you think they're not using Ridley?
Because I like the other guys better.
I think that's the easy answer to that question.
And part of it, I think, is Ridley might be a little bit in the doghouse too, and I don't know that as for a fact, but you only can dress so many players, and he's at the bottom of that list right now. There's going to be a wide receiver that doesn't dress. The other guys are all healthy. They like Wims and him came from the same school, but they like Wims better than him as a football player.
All right, this is from Gaming with Dojo. Would we still draft a quarterback with the Bears' first pick next year? Too early to tell on my.
I'm not saying they won't. I just don't think they will. I think that if you want an offensive tackle, you better take him in the first round, because the chances of him being good after that start going down. And just look at a lot of the starting tackles in the National Football League right now.
Well, I think they definitely have to improve their offensive line, but I don't think you can say what their number one need is until the season is completely over. All right, Greg, do you think that James Daniels can move to right guard next season, leaving Whitehair at left guard and Sam Mustipher at center?
No, I think next year you're going to see Daniels back at left guard, Whitehair at center, and Mustipher's back up.
Okay. Also, a question for me. This is from Aldo, by the way, I think. If the Bears make the playoffs, will I wear a Western-style hat like Greg's hat for an entire show? Absolutely yes. Greg will just send that over a lot. Yes.
I got another one.
Can we find a picture with Hoss Cartwright? Because the hat that he wore on Bonanza, that's the hat that I would wear. Yes.
Okay. I got another one. You can wear my other one.
Okay. Or maybe
Except your head might be bigger than mine. You might not be able to fit.
The hell with the hat. Just bring her over. Oh, this is the best part of this podcast right now. I think that's it for the questions, Greg. You and Aldo will be back. I'm guessing on Thursday to preview the game.
I gotta see what time I got therapy on my knee for what, and I have it in my car. I just got to go get it. And I'll tell Aldo. I'll let him know.
All right,
I'll text him in a little bit.
I thank Aldo for filling my big shoes come Thursday, and I'll of course
huge shoes.
Yeah,
and I'm going to hold them to a high standard.
Okay, and I'll be back, of course, with you on Monday after the Bears play at Minnesota. I'm really looking forward to that game. I mean, let's see what they're made of in that game.
You know what? It's the biggest game of the year. I know it's a cliche, but it really is.
Well, it's an elimination game for both.
That's right. It's shit or get off the pot time.
100%. All right, Greg, you take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, buddy.
All right, take care. Thanks, everybody.